very many thinking that that was okay. Like, oh yeah, let's just destroy legal immigration for the sake of this group of people. So I don't know. It's an incredibly frustrating time for everyone. So there's a lot of articles about uncertainty and people getting caught up in this. I wish there was more of a structured analysis on this whole thing, but there doesn't seem to be at the moment. Sorry, I'm looking for something here and hoping that I could find it, but I'm not. I thought I had something and I don't. So anyway, yeah. We exist in a state currently where, not a state like Illinois state, but a situation, a condition, where one party is swayed enough by the hardcore base who is anti-immigrant to be willing to, I don't know, compromise their standards, maybe their personal inclinations. There are enough of them that are willing to sort of go, well, I don't really like this, but that's what the president wants, or that's what this rabid right-wing base wants, or whatever, and they go along with it. They're willing to go along with it, and that, with the hardcore activists and that group, you end up with enough of them to pretty much destroy any chances of doing anything that's sensible or honest about this. Because let's face it, honestly, very, very few people, except the most rabid anti-immigration types, have a problem with the Dreamers. There are a few. There are a few people out there. But they're just, honestly, they're bigots. That's the only way I can think of to describe them. There is no logical or reasonable argument that states why Dreamers should be punished in some way. There just isn't. I mean, you can't come up with one. I have never heard one. I've never heard anything where I had to sit there and go, well, okay, I kind of understand that to a certain extent. I do understand, to some extent, arguments against quote-unquote illegal immigration. I get that. I get where those things are coming from. I think they're usually or mostly based on false information, on emotional reactions to things that where people search for a way of rationalizing their feelings. I think it's more often that than anything else. But there is some argument that can be made that a country must control its borders, and that allowing people to come in without going through the proper channels is problematic. I mean, I get that. Why is my phone beeping or buzzing or whatever it's doing here? I have to pretend it's... So, I mean, I do get that. And I think there are points to argue about there. I think there's discussion that can be had, that reasonable people could disagree about that. But the Dreamers, not really. I have never, ever heard an argument that lays out anything that states why there is a problem with just taking care of those people and saying, okay, this group is, they got caught up in a bad situation. It's like, I don't know, being in the wrong place at the wrong time or something like that. It's that kind of thing. They didn't choose their condition. They didn't choose their status. They may have wanted it. You may ask your kid, "Oh, do you want to go to America?" And they're like, "Oh, let's go," But they're not they were not adults. They were not able to think through all the potentials and come to a logical, reasoned, mature decision about how to come here, whether to come here, and how to do it. They weren't. They were just children. So if you wouldn't hold children responsible for any other kinds of things that weren't their fault, that they didn't decide. I mean, yeah, there's some people will say, oh, we should need to treat kids as adults if they commit adults' crimes. I don't agree with that, but I get that kind of thinking. Like if you have a 10-year-old and they murder somebody, that's a pretty serious thing. There's something terribly wrong in this situation where something like this would happen. So it's not, you need to take a very hard look at that situation to try and figure out what was going on. You can't just say, oh, it's just a kid, so they didn't know what they're doing, and just brush it off. It's a serious crime. But not being here without proper documentation is not a serious crime. However much it is treated that way, and there are people trying to paint that picture, that is not a serious crime. You haven't done anything to anybody. Period. You've just gone from one place to another. You've just crossed a border. I crossed the border into Indiana not that long ago and back again, and Ohio, and then through Indiana and back again. I mean, I cross borders. It happens when you travel. You cross borders. And it's not that big a deal. It's no bigger a deal for me to go to Indiana than it is for somebody from Guatemala to come to Texas. Except because of the political and legal consequences of doing that. But it's no bigger a deal in terms of what is involved with people generally. If those borders weren't there, let's take a hypothetical situation where all the people are in place doing all the things that they're doing now somehow, and yet borders don't exist. It is no bigger a deal from somebody to come from this place to that place than it is for me to go from where I am to, a couple of hours north of, or south or east or west of here. It's no big deal. Nothing has happened. Nothing has been done to anybody. No one has suffered any harm. It's just not a problem, except that it has been made into a problem because you have the political systems and the laws in place and the prejudices that people have that lie behind many of those laws and those systems. That's what creates it as a problem. That's what turns it into a problem. Now, clearly, there are places in Europe that have suffered. Greece, for example, refugees coming over there from North Africa. Huge numbers of people. You have refugee camps in all sorts of countries in the Middle East and in Europe. Anywhere you have a trouble spot, you have people running away from that problem, from wars or terrible things or terrorism or whatever is going on there, or famine or revolutions or whatever is happening. You have people running away. When those people run away, they run to somewhere. When they run to that place, it's often a place that is not set up to handle them. It doesn't have the space. It doesn't have the food. It doesn't have an infrastructure. It has nothing in place to deal with all these new people who are suddenly coming here. That's a problem. That's a crisis. That needs something to happen in order to deal with that. Somebody needs to do something. It is a situation where people need to stand up and say, okay, we have this problem. We have hundreds of thousands of people coming here. We have no place for them to stay. We have no food to give them. There's no clean water. There's no sanitation. I don't know what to do. We have to resolve this. In that kind of situation, yes, immigration or refugees, however you want to describe it, it's the same thing basically, in the sense that it's just somebody coming from there to here. The different words basically describe a different reason why they come here, or why they came here, and what their intentions are, and how long they intend to stay, and all those things. I mean, that's the distinctions that you get when you talk about refugees or immigrants. But basically, overall, you just have people coming from one place to another. So if there were a situation like that somewhere in the United States because of people coming here, then you would have a valid argument to make that this is a problem that must be dealt with. You could say, oh, look at this. You've got all these people pouring in here. We have no place for them to stay. We have no food to feed them with. We have no water to give them. There is no work for them. There is nothing. They're just coming, and they don't stop, and we have to do something about that. Okay, I get that. If that were the situation, then you might have some of the reactions that we've seen about immigrants and immigration in this country could be justified to some extent. I can see that you're afraid. I can see that you're troubled and disturbed and you don't know what to do. I understand that. I think your reaction is wrong to hate these people or to criminalize them or to pathologize them in some way. I think that is the wrong reaction, but I understand why you're so desperate about this or why you're so upset about it. That makes sense, or that would make sense. But that is not the situation we have here in this country at all. At no place do we have immigrants, legal or otherwise, pouring over the borders and just stacking up in piles because they have nowhere to go and starving because they have no food. And, there's nothing like that going on anywhere in the United States, period. People are coming in, they're making their way to places where they're finding work, they're finding friends, they're finding something that they need, and then they're settling down there. And they're doing just fine. And they're becoming part of their communities. And they're working, they're feeding themselves, they're taking care of themselves, they are taking care of other people, they're creating jobs for other people. They're helping each other out. All these things are going on. There are entire communities that are helped by immigrants coming here, legal and otherwise. Places where people in this country have moved out of because there's nothing to do there anymore. There used to be a pork factory there or something, but that closed down, so all the young people are now moving to the city and the town is dying. There are lots and lots of cities. If you drive around, even here in Illinois, if you drive around, there are a lot of small towns where most of the businesses are boarded up. There aren't very many people there. There just isn't much of a town there anymore. Whatever drew people there in the first place isn't there anymore. And so people have moved away. And some of these places around the country have been revitalized by immigrants coming there and saying, well, here's a place to live. Here's a building where I can start my business. I'll start a business that is different from anything that has been around here, and people will come to that business. Maybe it's a restaurant. Maybe it's, a tanning salon. I don't know what it is, but they start something, and people come there, and then now they have making money from those people. They're spending money at the grocery store, at the bank, at the gas station, at whatever, and they're making the town come alive again to some extent. We could take a whole lot more people than we have been taking for years now as immigrants coming to this country, and we could give them incentives to go to some of these small towns that are doing poorly, or even big towns. They don't have to be small towns. You've got cities like Detroit and these big industrial cities that are just no longer have their big factories and things. We could give people incentives to go to these places and say, okay, you want to come to the U.S., fine, but you have to live in one of these towns that's struggling. And do what you do to make it come back to life. And you know what? They would come back to life. They would be great places again. And this could happen all over the place if we had sensible immigration policies. But instead we have people who just treat immigrants because they're different, because they look or sound or act differently. They are something to be afraid of. So we have a lot of people who are against immigrants who know nothing about immigrants. I had a conversation the other day with someone who has started doing substitute teaching. And she was talking about ESL students, English as a second language students, and what great workers they were and how interested they were in learning the language and in getting their schoolwork right and just in studying and learning. And she said, if I had known before, I would have been more supportive of immigrants, but I didn't know any immigrants. And that is the case all over the place. You have people who don't know immigrants, who aren't aware of their interactions with them when they do in some way, or they'll just see them in the background and go, yeah, those people over there. But they don't realize, they don't have any instance where they talk to somebody or have anything to do with them. And they're the ones who are often, more often than not, the most actively and vociferously anti-immigrant of all, because all they see is something strange and different that frightens them, and they don't want it here. So that's the kind of thing we're basing our political situation, our whole national immigration system on, are people who don't know what they're talking about, funneling their opinions through people who in some cases don't know what they're talking about, in other cases know very well what they're talking about, but are lying or well, lying. No, I'm not going to lie or anything. It's just plain lying. Who are lying in order to garner the support of the people who don't know anything, in order to justify actions that really are unsupportable, that there's no justification for. And that's the situation that we have here. And that's kind of what's going on right now in a lot of places. So I've got a little bit of time left here. Excuse me. I thought I would read this really quickly because I thought it was kind of interesting, and it kind of articulates what I'm getting at here, or parts of what I'm getting at. And this is entitled, Why Employers in Georgia Are Watching the Immigration Debate Closely. So as the Senate tries to hash out a deal on immigration, it's not just immigrants that have a lot at stake. So do the businesses that hire them. We're suffering very much from shortage of labor, skilled labor here in Dalton, said Amit Salama, the CEO of Oriental Weavers USA, the American branch of a giant Egyptian company. Salama recently showed me around his factory in Dalton, Georgia, where hulking machines weave bright-colored yarn together. Dalton bills itself as the carpet capital of the world. Wall-to-wall carpeting was basically invented here after World War II. Today, Dalton is ringed by big factories that make most of the carpet sold in the U.S. It's a conservative corner of northwest Georgia where Donald Trump won more than 70% of the vote. But even here, some employers are nervous that the Trump administration's immigration policies will make it harder to find enough workers. 2 years ago, I wish I'd had this problem because you could have wallpapered our office with the resumes, said Lawton Roberts, the CEO of Employment Innovations Incorporated, a staffing company in nearby Rome, Georgia. Roberts says he's scrambling to fill hundreds of job openings. Business is booming in Dalton. The town has finally bounced back from the Great Recession when it suffered some of the worst job losses in the country. Now employers here have a different problem. Too many jobs open and not enough applicants to fill them. And then you have stupidity here. Roberts supports President Trump, who he thinks has been good for business. Still, Roberts is anxious about what the president's immigration policies could mean for the local economy. He's particularly concerned about the future of DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. DACA allows undocumented immigrants brought to the country as children to live and work here. What kind of impact, if those folks are going to be deported, what's that going to have on the labor force? Roberts asked. It's a legitimate question. Yeah, you should have asked that before you voted. Anyway, sorry for the editorial asides. It just infuriates me. Anyway, I'll try to read this in a more straight way. DACA is now at the center of the immigration debate on Capitol Hill and in the courts. The Trump administration moved to end the program, saying that Congress needs to come up with a replacement, and employers in Dalton are worried about what happens next. DACA has been a big issue for us, said Rob Bradham, president of the Greater Dalton Chamber of Commerce, just because they're valuable employees to our industries and we don't want to lose them. Surprise, surprise. Branham says as many as 4,000 DACA recipients live in the Dalton area. That's not the only thing employers here are worried about. The Trump administration has also threatened to crack down on businesses that hire undocumented immigrants. In Dalton, that's bringing back memories of the 1990s, when immigration authorities raided some of the biggest carpet mills in town. Now U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is talking about ramping up workplace raids again. This year, you're going to see a significant increase in worksite enforcement, ICE Acting Director Thomas Homan says. We're going to hold employers responsible and take action on the employer. Plus, we're going to arrest the illegal alien that's working at the site. Ugh. In Georgia, this should not be a problem. The state passed a law a few years ago that required big employers to use the federal E-Verify system, an online tool that reviews paperwork, internet, to ensure that workers have legal status. But immigration lawyers say in practice, the system isn't foolproof. There are some employers in this area that I know of that do hire a lot of illegal immigrants that do not have status, said Joseph Baldwin, a local immigration attorney. He says he's gotten calls from nervous employers. They're saying, I can't afford to lose these employees that are sort of running things here, Baldwin said. You know, these guys have no criminal records. They've got families. They're really part of my family now. What can we do? Unfortunately, more times than not, the answer is there's no solution. Community leaders told me that only about 10% of immigrants in Dalton are here illegally and that most do have legal status. Some have lived in Dalton for decades, raising families and starting businesses here. Mariscos Puerto Vallarta is a seafood restaurant in Dalton that's owned by Mexican immigrants. Over a lunch of ceviche and fish tacos, several local businessmen said that fear and uncertainty hang over a lot of families here. A family that has someone with DACA, they don't know yet what's going to happen, said Francisco Penuaga, who owns 2 car dealerships in the Dalton area. All these people, they could buy houses, they could buy cars, whatever, but they are afraid. They are not spending money right now, I think. These community leaders say that's a problem for business and the region's economy too. So that kind of gets at least part of what I was talking about, in the sense that these people are here working, whether they're legal, whether they have not proper documentation or any documentation. They're not just here sitting around. They're not here in refugee camps. They're not here sitting by the side of the road, holding out their hands, begging for spare change. These people are coming here. They're finding a place to live, and they're fitting themselves into the local economy, to the local community, and they're becoming a part of the world that they live in. And that's fine, and that should be fine. That shouldn't be a problem. It is only a problem because some people are making it into a problem. And then they try to retroactively excuse their behavior by saying, oh, but these people are criminals. They're bringing gangs, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing this, they're bringing that. All of that stuff is nonsense. In any large population, you will find some bad actors. It doesn't matter who they are. Be it a population of monks or a population of whoever, I don't know, immigrants, a population of people that born and bred in a certain place, a big family. It doesn't matter what the group is. The larger the group is, the more you will find that there are members of that group who are doing bad things. It's just inevitable. There are people everywhere who are doing bad things. They're not necessarily a huge group. We don't have a ridiculously high crime rate. It tends to be concentrated in areas of extreme poverty. And yeah, you're going to have more crime when you have people who are desperate and struggling and who feel that they don't have any options. You will have more crime in those areas. That's natural. And that's something that you could resolve with, instead of incarcerating everybody and like rounding them all up and going, well, doesn't matter why you did it, you're going down for it. You could try fixing those areas and making them better and giving those people opportunities and doing all sorts of things. But that's a larger issue. What I'm getting at, though, is that in any large group of people, you can find bad actors. And if you're looking for an excuse or a rationale for why you are bigoted or racist or whatever you may be, you can probably find one. If you want to say, oh, well, all those people with long hair, they're all drug dealers, or they're all criminals, or they're all murderers, or they're all something. Any group, you can find enough of them that are doing bad things that you can say, you can just point at that group and say, look, those people are bad. And this is what our government is doing with immigrants, generally. Immigrants from certain countries in particular, but pretty much across the board with just immigrants, with people who are coming here. They're trying to make it sound like being here, unless you went through this long, slow, torturous process of being naturalized, you are somehow prone to being criminal, and therefore something must be done about it. But it's sheer nonsense, and it's an excuse that we should not allow. We just simply should not allow them to get away with this. And, some of us are trying very, very hard to keep that in line. All I can say is, what can you do? I hear the question, even though you didn't say it, you're thinking it. What can you do? You can vote. You can vote every election, from dog catcher on up to president and everything in between, and you can make it a point to discover what your representatives think about certain things. Are they supporters of guns for everybody? Are they supporters of lock up the immigrants and throw away the key? What are they supporters of? And if they don't support the things that you believe in, vote for somebody else. Find somebody that does support the things you believe in, or at least says they do, and then vote for them. And then if they don't follow up on it, then vote them out and put somebody else in. That is what we can do. That's what we can all do. We all have that power to make those kinds of changes and decisions. And so you don't have to get out and march and hold a sign. You don't have to go here and do that, this or that. You don't have to go to the desert and put out jugs of water, for people crossing the border. You don't have to do those things. Just vote. Just vote, and you'll at least be helping. You won't solve the problem, but you'll help. And maybe little by little, we can work on this together and make something happen. So anyway, you've been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM. I hope you tune in next time. We'll see you later.